My name is Mike van Graan. I'm a South African based in Cape Town. I work as a playwright and as an independent consultant in the arts and culture space. One of the main reasons why we need to be discussing cultural policy, particularly within the broader global South, and by the global South I mean within Africa, the Arab world, Asia, Latin America, is because cultural policies tend to get made in the broader global North, and these policies are introduced to art makers, theatre makers, musicians and the like in the global South. And because our governments generally don't really support the arts, either through policy or through making funding available, we embrace policies that come from abroad because of the resources that come with them. So a few years back, the emphasis of international culture policy might have been culture and development, and then it became the creative industries, and then it kind of morphs into intercultural dialogue and cultural diversity, and then it will become, in a few years' time, climate change and the arts and the like. And so what tends to happen is that we panel beat our projects to fit in with the new cultural policy paradigms in order to access the resources that come through organizations that we work with. And so I think why we as arts practitioners and creative workers in the global South need to understand cultural policy is for us to know how we can maneuver around these cultural policies in order for us to also have a little bit more dignity, I suppose, when it comes to formulating what it is that we do, and that we're not simply adapting what our projects are to fit in with paradigms and policies that are coming from the global North. These kinds of policy imperatives can be addressed by artists is in fact for artists themselves to organize themselves. That in fact, in my experience, is the only way, because policy is normally created by governments, by bureaucrats, by international agencies. And when we as the people who are affected by policy are not engaged in the formulation of those policies, we become the victims of those policies, or we become the so-called beneficiaries of them. So in my experience in South Africa, for example, when we were first formulating policy post-1994, we as creative practitioners organized ourselves into a national formation called the National Arts Coalition. And because we were organized and did the international research, and by the time the elections were held in 1994, we were the one organization that had quite clear proposals about what a new cultural dispensation should look like. And as a consequence of that, we were able to influence the policy formulation process in quite a significant way, so that the first arts and culture policy came to reflect the ideas and the proposals that we had made as arts and culture practitioners. The changes that have now been brought about over the last 20 years or so have been as a direct consequence of government no longer consulting with or feeling the need to consult with artists. But the fact that it's taken them 3 years to implement that particular policy is again the result of us as arts practitioners resisting that policy and saying we will not accept it, and they need to reformulate that policy until such time that we are happy with it. I understand that many artists are not really wanting to engage around things with policy because it seems so abstract. Many of our governments have adopted policies, they simply have not implemented them and the like. And artists are much more concerned when there is a lack of funding, how are they going to be able to pay the rent? And they are much more concerned about creating and distributing their work as they should be. And I think that, to some extent, how I have tried to meet with these two challenges is to work in parallel. So on the one hand, there are organizations that are dealing with the macro issues, advocating, trying to change government policy, trying to change international policy, trying to bring about new policies at a global level, and at the same time, finding ways for how we as arts practitioners can survive and do our work on a day-to-day basis.